I had my first drink at 11. One of my cousins gave me a beer because I asked for one. All the people I admired stood around a liquor cabinet or a keg of beer. And so at family picnics and gatherings, I said, hey, can I have one once? And they gave me a beer and it tasted awful. It was a warm old Milwaukee. And I was like, oh, this thing's gross. But they said, oh, if you take it, you got to finish it. So I was trying to drink this whole thing. And finally, one of my cousins poured it out. But when I told my friends that I had a beer, their eyes got wide and they looked at me like, oh my gosh, what was it like? Of course, not many kids that had a drink at that age. And I realized that they sort of looked up to me. And some of that affirming sort of love and sort of self-esteem stuff I started to find in my relationship with alcohol. I knew where to steal beer. We had an overflow fridge in the garage.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm the host, David Fromm. Every single one of us has an impact on someone, whether or not we realize it. Maybe it's a friend who was there when life felt impossible. The one who listened, encouraged you, and helped you push through. Or maybe it's a parent who never missed a game, always there in the stands, cheering you on no matter what. Those relationships shape us, and they remind us that we're not alone. But just as the right people can bring out the best in us, the wrong ones can do the opposite. Some relationships make us doubt ourselves or pull us away from the person we can be. Maybe it's a friend who constantly criticizes you, or a parent who, instead of building you up, they make you doubt yourself by being overly critical or just not there. Those experiences leave a mark too, and they can shape the way we see ourselves in the world around us. That's why it's important to recognize which relationships help us grow and which hold us back. Today's guest had a difficult relationship with his parents, and he ended up turning to drugs and alcohol to deal with it. One day, he decided to try ice climbing, which ended up starting him down the path to eventually help others struggling with addiction and founding one of the most dynamic and effective organizations helping people overcome addiction. I want to welcome Scott Strode to the podcast. He's the founder of The Phoenix and the author of a new book called Rise, Recover, Thrive. Scott, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled to talk about the work you're doing and that the Phoenix is doing. So I just wanted to jump right in and, ask you to talk to, tell your story. How did you, end up down the road to addiction, and then, how did that, what were the factors that contributed to that?
Yeah, well, I think, when we look at addiction in our country, we often end up sort of treating the symptoms of it and not as much looking at the underlying why. And for me, my addiction foundation for it was laid long before I ever tried a drink or a drug for the first time. But, I had a father with untreated mental health struggles, and I had a stepfather with untreated alcoholism. And I grew up because of that in a very dynamic world as a kid. And, my mom coped with her childhood stuff through workaholism, right? So she was at work, and stepdad would have, X amount of martinis at night. And when I was with my dad, he had trouble taking care of himself, let alone us as kids. And my brother and sister and I kind of grew up without a lot of supervision when we were with our father. And the supervision we did have was pretty demeaning and emotionally abusive. And then when I was with my mom, it was a lot of different babysitters raising us. And I know that's something that parents have to do, but when she was with us, she had trouble connecting emotionally. It was, she was, I just remember her on the phone a lot, snapping her fingers, pointing at us to be quiet. That was the most common interaction I had with my mom as a kid. But really the emotional pain came from my stepdad and my father. And it started to teach me that I was the problem, or I was the one who had failed or made the mistakes, or, it was just constantly, riding me about what I should have done better and what I did wrong. And I always say that my dad was the kind of dad that if you lost the soccer game, he'd yell at you. And if you won it, he'd yell at you because you could have done better. And so there really weren't many opportunities for me to succeed until I started to take that on as my identity, that I was a failure. And I think that on top of my learning disability, I'm dyslexic. The educational system really wasn't built for me. And so, despite sort of IQ tests, they put me in Votech. So I was going to learn how to make aluminum siding. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that was what they just determined was my path. And so when I found drugs and alcohol, it made some of that pain go away and those self-esteem wounds feel a little bit better. And so I just started drinking and using more.
I mean, obviously you know better than I would, but like a lot of addiction is rooted obviously way back in childhood and in the past. So kind of take me on the timeline on, when you first started, where you feel like you first were relying on alcohol to cope, and like, how did that progress? And like, then when did you get to a part where you wanted to try to stop this?
Yeah. So I had my first drink at 11. One of my cousins gave me a beer because I asked for one. All the people I admired stood around a liquor cabinet or a keg of beer. And so at family picnics and gatherings, I said, "Hey, can I have one once?" And they gave me a beer and it tasted awful. It was a warm old Milwaukee. And I was like, "Oh, this thing's gross." But they said, "Oh, if you take it, you got to finish it." So I was trying to drink this whole thing. And finally one of my cousins poured it out. But when I told my friends that I had a beer, their eyes got wide and they looked at me like, "Oh my gosh, what was it like?" Of course, not many kids had a drink at that age. And I realized that they sort of looked up to me now. And some of that affirming sort of love and sort of self-esteem stuff I started to find in my relationship with alcohol. I knew where to steal beer. We had an overflow fridge in the garage because the one in the house wasn't big enough to hold it all. So I would steal a 6-pack on the weekend, then a 12-pack, then a case, then a bottle of vodka. And all of a sudden I was the cool kid and people wanted to hang out with me. And then my own drinking and using got worse. And then, classic story, my weed dealer was selling something else and I tried Coke for the first time. And all of a sudden I was using Coke and smoking Coke. And it just started to strip away the dreams of who I thought I could be. And I think when you're in active addiction, you tend to surround yourself with people who drink and use like you. So it's easy for your addiction to hold on for a long time because it sometimes doesn't even stand out in the circles that you're sort of running in. But I started to realize that my relationship with it was different than other people's.
Did you hit a rock bottom, or what made you decide to try to get help and try to get sober?
Yeah, I mean, I started to find a sense of purpose, through my work. I started working on boats and I worked in shipyards, and I started to realize that I had these kind of unique gifts in woodworking and craftsmanship. And so I started to find sort of self-actualize in those different things. But at night I'd go back and, drink till I was blackout drunk and wake up and go to work hungover the next day. And so my addiction was still super active. And I tried to quit a bunch of times, but it was hard because my whole lifestyle was built around that behavior.
Oh.
And then the last night I used, I was experiencing a lot of paranoia from cocaine and been drinking since, the day before. And I just knew that was how my life was going to end. And I thought somebody's going to have to tell my mom that that's how her son dies from an overdose. And that was the last night I used.
Know a little bit about your story. I believe that ice climbing played a role in your sobriety. How'd you pick ice climbing, and what role did it play?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize this at the time, but when I was with my dad growing up, we spent time outdoors. He lived in farmland, Pennsylvania. He was a hunter. We would walk through the woods, and we did more hiking with guns than we did hunting. But he taught me about how to listen to where the pheasants roost at night, and and which ducks were they by how they land on the water. And, so I always had this love for nature, and I felt drawn to it. So I was trying to change my lifestyle. I was living in Boston and doing carpentry, and I said I wanted to get outdoorsy. So I went in this outdoor store to get outdoorsy, and I asked the salesman, like, what kind of stuff do I need to make this happen? And he sold me a jacket, a Gore-Tex jacket. And I walked out, and I saw this brochure for ice climbing, and it was the wildest thing I'd ever seen. There's somebody hanging off this ice cliff from their ice axes. And I thought, maybe I could try that. There was this like ember inside of me that thought I had so much more potential than I was expressing at that point in my life. And so I signed up for this class, and I tried ice climbing, and I was hooked right away. Even though I suffered my way up this climb, the guide climbed it effortlessly. And I thought maybe someday if I really put my mind to it, I could climb as gracefully as this guy did. And I was off and running. And then that led me to triathlon. That led me to boxing. And each time I got in the ring or crossed the finish line, I healed some of those self-esteem wounds from when I was a kid.
So that seems to be the ember that eventually would spark what your life's work has been in the Phoenix. How did you go from having that realization and understanding that you're getting better by, engaging in all these activities, to starting an organization to help others?
Yeah. I mean, I think as I, climbed and boxed and, rode and did all that my way out of my addiction, I started to see other people who were still active in addiction. I had gotten sober, and I had been on climbing expeditions, and I had raced Ironman triathlon. I did all these activities, and I just thought, man, I need to take some of these guys with me, because I had so many friends that were still actively struggling. And I thought, I'm just going to take them up a mountain or cross a finish line with them. And I think they'll see the same thing in themselves that I did. And that was the idea of the Phoenix. And I was surrounded by a couple people. My climbing partner was sober at the time, and another friend of mine was a clinical social worker who was also a climber. And we just started talking about how can we use our unique gifts to try to help others. And that's where the idea of the Phoenix came from. So it's just any meaningful activity led by somebody who's been impacted by substance use can be a Phoenix event. But there is this ethos, this code of conduct that we're there to lift each other up, and that we treat each other with dignity, and we believe in the intrinsic strength in everyone that comes to Phoenix. And it's through that ethos that we frame this nurturing and supportive community. And we went from 60 or so people the first year we started Phoenix to now we've served 800,000 people, and we're on our way to serve 1 million by the next few months, I think.
God bless you, Scott. That's amazing. Talk about having an exponential impact. That's fabulous. So I'm really interested in like how you went from gathering, probably a lot of it was relationally, I would imagine, at first, and saying, hey, this is kind of working for me, to having a physical location, to attracting more people, to just really growing your impact, in an exponential way. What's that progress look like?
Yeah. I mean, that growth is, I think when you find something that you think is innovative and different and sort of an empowerment approach, that believes in the strength in people, sometimes it can be hard to move it forward because the system around you is so established that it seems impossible. Like I remember a guy early on just saying, how is riding bikes with people in recovery going to keep them sober? And I was just said, because there's something you find in yourself when you get to the top of that climb on the bike and you look back over that vista of what you went up and the sweat and struggle it took to get there, and the fist bumps that you find with the other guys you're riding with. There's this unity and this sense of what you can accomplish. And then you have that as your armor when you're shocked by the realities of life, and you don't have to pick up a drink or a drug to use. This is this unique approach. And I don't think people got it right away. So we had to sort of just persevere, even though the system around us wasn't seeing people the same way. People were being seen as a problem to be managed, right? They were trying to incarcerate their way out of addiction. The war on drugs was still, sort of tailing off. And we were just in this place where people were not seen for their strength. And so I just knew in my heart that if we found the right people, the right philanthropists, the right partners that shared our vision, that Phoenix could become a movement more than an organization. And ultimately that's what ended up happening.
Yeah. So at its essence, the method that has allowed Phoenix to be really successful in helping people overcome addiction. And I'd love to hear why you think it is more, or even if there's statistics as to how successful it is. But if I hear you right, the essence is that people feel a sense of accomplishment that helps them when they succeed in the physical activity. And then they also have that partnership with other and community with other folks. And that helps gird them for the challenges just in regular life.
Yeah, that's a great framing of it. And I think there's something special too about, humans when we face a greater adversity together, it bonds us in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So, even if that adversity is the rock climb ahead of us or the workout we wrote on the whiteboard in the gym, even if we've fabricated the sort of adversity, pushing through it. And, when you have, 70 kettlebell swings to do and 50 burpees and X amount of push-ups and, you and I high five on the rest period and get right back to work, at the end of that, we are closer. And in that bond, I can turn to you when I'm having a tough day and thinking about picking up and using again. And I know you'll be there for me. And then the next day I might be there for you. So it's really about our ethos of building, nurturing community where the magic happens, and the principles that underpin it, the belief in people and the belief in the dignity of all people.
So you've written a book.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to, hear about Rise, Recover, and Thrive. And, why did you want to write a book in the first place?
I actually wanted to write a book because I feel like, sort of as I was building Phoenix, I was witnessing our country in this cultural moment of feeling more divided than ever before, I think. And what I saw every day, I'm sitting in a Phoenix gym right now and I'm looking out my window, it's full of people and they're lifting each other up, and if we went out to the parking lot, I imagine we'd see all sorts of different, like political affiliation bumper stickers on people's car, whatever they're believing in out there. But in here, it doesn't separate them. In here, they're still lifting each other up. And I think that is the foundation of our country. I think the principles that are the founding of our country are really designing sort of a nation level culture of empowerment and trying to lift each other up. And I wanted to share with folks how this group of people seen as on the fringe of our society, people with ankle monitors and crooked noses from one too many fights, and people that have their shopping cart out front of the Phoenix building with all their worldly possessions in it, experiencing homelessness, come in and lift each other up. And I think that society could learn more broadly from that lesson about no matter what we're going through, we all deserve dignity and we all can lift each other up. And we aren't those people over there. We are us and they are them. And by coming together, we can be stronger.
Yeah, I think that principle of dignity and how it guides how we approach other people, it's pretty transformational because, you don't speak to someone really disrespectfully, even whether it's online or, in person, when you actually respect their dignity, or, you don't try to ruin other people or, do something bad. It really transforms how we think about our fellow people. And, I think it's so easy to look down on folks who have had struggles and, feel good about ourselves by stepping on somebody else. But if we really respect the dignity in one another, I think that's how we're going to make a society that, really we really engage in mutual benefit. We try to bring everybody up and let everybody achieve their dreams. And I think you're a pretty amazing example of that, and what and the way that you're multiplying that effect, every day through the Phoenix is pretty fabulous. So I really hope the book, kind of even takes it to another level and help kind of spread that gospel out to people rather who can't come to a gym maybe.
Yeah. And that's the beauty with the book and our volunteer scaling, which is the way we grow into communities now. Anyone, anywhere can start Phoenix. They just have to download our mobile app and do the volunteer training, and they can be the one that brings Phoenix to their community. Whether they're just civically minded and they want to help folks who are struggling in their community, or they've been touched by addiction themselves through a loved one, or they themselves, they can be part of the solution.
How long have you guys had that app? And what are you seeing? What kind of impact are you seeing at this point?
Yeah, the app I think has been transformational for us, because we've had it since the beginning of the pandemic. We launched it as our virtual platform grew, but we kept our virtual programming because we realized we could reach into rural communities that really don't have many resources to support people overcoming addiction. And then we realized too that there's other people out there doing great work in the nonprofit sector. And if we bring them into our platform, they can help our constituents and we can help theirs. If you're a reentry program, workforce development program, a certain cross section of your folks could benefit from finding Phoenix, and a certain number of Phoenix members could benefit from finding that program. So we now have about 60 or so partner organizations on our app, and we're about to rebrand and relaunch our app at the end of the month into New Form. And we named it New Form because it's really a new form of community, a new form of digital community, a place that's underpinned by the same ethos that we're here to lift each other up. And our plan for that platform is to fill it up with as many nonprofits that work in and around addiction and mental health, so that when you download that, you can find a whole choice of resources that can help you on your journey of healing. And, I think we could have a whole nother section on healthcare and how our healthcare system isn't really addressing the needs of folks in this country right now, and how there needs to be some innovation there. And that's really what New Form is focused on, is creating other pathways where people can heal from mental health and addiction.
So who, if someone's listening to the show, who would be the right person to download that app and engage with it?
I would say anyone who has been impacted by substance use or mental health, either personally or through a loved one, or anyone who's civically minded and they want to be part of the solution around these two issues in their community. Because you can jump in there and either become a volunteer or just be part of the community. The only cost of membership to Phoenix is 48 hours of sobriety. So if you can put together 48 hours sober, come be part of it. And by being there, you're part of the solution, because you're there to lift people up. And I think what you'll find, the more you come, is they're lifting you up too.
Well, so the name of the book is Rise, Recover, Thrive. So where can people find it, and how can they buy it?
Yeah, you can find it anywhere books are sold. I
always love that line.
Yeah, anywhere. I was so proud to be able to say that, because for a while you could only buy it directly through the publisher. Right. So
soon we're going to call you best-selling author.
Yeah, well, maybe. But I think one thing I just want to mention before we wrap up is just that another key element I think in the book you'll find in the back half, and it's really about leadership. Mm-hmm. And about the role of leaders, in this sort of recovery movement and driving creative destruction, doing things so much better tomorrow that what we have today becomes obsolete. But I think there's this cultural moment in our country too, where leaders could also listen to this message of principles, that we don't have to push others down to lift others up, that we can all be lifted by helping lift each other. And I think that's something I'd love to hear coming out of DC a bit more, is how we are lifting each other up, all of us, not at the expense of others.
I think it's a fabulous message. It really is. It's a needed message, and one that would really change our country and a lot of people's lives.
I agree. And there's some good nuggets around that in the later chapters. So I hope you get a chance to take a look at it and enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I encourage everybody to go check it out, pick it up. Scott, thanks so much. Well, first of all, for all the work that you're doing. I mean, you're changing people's lives. Your life's work is changing people's lives, and it's phenomenal. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me. And I'll just leave you with this thought too, is that, I'm one changed life and see what is possible with that ripple in others. Imagine every single person that we get out of that burning building of addiction, the potential they have to contribute to our society and to their loved ones. So no one is beyond hope.
Amen. Well, folks, it's always inspiring to hear how someone's able to turn their life around. And Scott's been able to take his story and help tens of thousands of others, actually hundreds of thousands of others that are dealing with addiction. If you'd like to get a copy of Scott's book, the name again is Rise, Recover, Thrive. And if you'd like to learn more about the Phoenix, you can go to phoenix.org. That's phoenix.org. If you like the episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Friends, always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.